Hey, welcome to the Newcomer podcast. It's Eric Newcomer here. I'm fresh off Deus Medicina. I think I'm literally wearing the same sweater I wore to Deus Medicina. I promise I changed my clothes, but you get attached to a sweater and then I wear it to death. Anyway, yeah, it was a great event. This was our inaugural AI Health and Longevity Summit. We brought together, some 200 people in San Francisco, heavy mix of founders, investors, members of the media, other health insiders, to talk about three big themes rising in health right now. One, obviously, foundation models and the rise of generative artificial intelligence, which is powering companies like Abridge, which is doing doctor note-taking and open evidence, which is helping doctors diagnose patients. Both companies had their co-founders speak at Deus Medicina. Second, we had the longevity trend with GLP-1s, suddenly making everybody convinced, helping healthy people. There's a lot of money to be made there, a lot of value to be created for patients. We had the co-founder of Noom, Seju, whose company is doing, I think, microdosing GLP-1s. We had Celine, the co-founder and CEO of Loyal, who is helping dogs live longer, and always very thoughtful speaker on longevity. So we had that longevity theme. And then third, there's all the insanity with MAHA, Make America Healthy Again, RFK, and the Trump administration's changes to healthcare. So how is that sort of an inflection point for good and bad? And there was definitely some soul searching of whether, the traditional Republicans were helping Medicare Advantage as much as some investors had thought. Democrats like to beat up on Medicare Advantage, and now Trump hasn't come in and saved the day either. And that's obviously been an exciting area of investment. So those were three big themes. Other themes, took us by surprise. China's ability to do drug trials much more effectively than US certainly stood out. And then I think the final theme I'd flag before kicking this over would just be, continued hopes that patients will be buyers of healthcare sort of directly. And, we had the CEO of Function Health speak, who's selling diagnostic tests to consumers. And we had some healthy debate over whether consumers would prefer only to use their insurance company or not. Anyway, those are my high-level takes. We picked two of our favorite panels to share here in the podcast feed. First, my conversation with Bob Kocher at Venrock and Annie Lamont at Oak HTFT, two of the top health investors. And then the second is me with Nayeema Raza, who I co-hosted Deus Medicina. We interviewed the ever spicy Vinod Khosla. And I wanted to share the investor conversations because I do think they zoom out the farthest. You get the greatest scope of what we really covered in the day. We're going to post a lot, if not all, of the other talks on our YouTube channel. So go check out Newcomer Media's YouTube channel. You can always go to the Substack newcomer.co to get routed to our stuff. So go watch the videos there. But I think this conversation with Bob and Annie, and then my conversation with Nayeema and Vinod, really helped sum up some of the big questions of the day. So without further ado, give them a listen.
Investors that I really trust, both in terms of having a good sense on policy and having good values, and then being very serious about like the businesses you invest in. So excited to talk about it all. And obviously this is still a technology business at the end of the day. So the changes in technology will power everything you're doing. I just want to start off, we're talking about healthy businesses. What are some startups, earlier stage businesses where you think this is not like a long bet on like the technology coming together? You feel like they've got a great business model. Like where are areas right now you're excited about, like business model types in startups? Annie, you want to go first?
Sure. So look, it doesn't matter if it's healthcare, fintech, technology. I mean, the best business model out there is SaaS software. Right? I mean,
Wait.
It works over and over again.
I thought software is dead.
No, software is back. I think that's what's really interesting. So I two parts to this question, right? And the answer is that SaaS software, anytime, anywhere, if I can find that. And we were both in Athena way back. And that's a version that's like a 70% because it's SaaS, software enabled service, really. But SaaS, if you can get 80, 90% margins, great. And I feel like we're back there in terms of being able to sell software to providers and health systems where, EHR has effectively scooped up all of those dollars, for the last 20 years, and now they're open for business. But I think the other part is impact. And I think Bob and I are both in this for impact.
Right.
And so I think, like you just had Prashant from Keto, one of our companies, and that's impact, like embedding, obviously, AI within shared delivery, like see the impact, love that. We just sold a company called CareBridge. And, if you actually looked at that model, that was dual eligibles, LTSS in the home, where you were taking risk on them. But the first part of the business was the wedge. And that was, they became the standard for evaluating what kind of caregiver should be in your home and for how many hours. And if you can believe it, there's literally no standard in America for that. And so they created a standard and algorithms around it and support. And that's really what the health plans first bought. And then I took that wedge into taking risk on all of those patients. So, to me, impact matters.
Bob, you have businesses that are making you salivate right now?
Absolutely. But first, thank you, Eric and Nayeema, for bringing us together. This is super cool. Yeah. And I love that you taught us some Latin. Appreciate that.
Yeah, I checked it. I actually did. I have my wonkiest friend from college who's like a classics professor. I did call him up and made sure that it was like somewhat coherent as a name in Latin. So it was blessed.
I'm glad that you took, I took linguistics. It's a good thing. And I'm a zoologist. But first to Annie, yeah, impact matters. That's why we do this job. We could be SaaS investors, and that would suck. Helping dual eligible people live better is like what we actually want to do.
Yeah.
I think 3 things define a good business model, and once it's happened to me. The first one is get paid up front a lot of money. Most healthcare businesses that I'm involved with and see don't get paid a lot up front. They get paid later and not enough. And then you're like hoping to make it up on value later. Right. And then cash is king, and having it first is really good, number 1. Number 2 is software. Software has a lot better margins, and you can do a lot more when you have more margin. Then number 3 is have very long contracts, which is hard to do in the US, but the best business I'm involved with from a business model perspective is one called Need.
I knew you were going to say that. I was like, I have a friend who worked there. Yeah.
And it's a company we started in Korea.
Yeah.
In Korea, people buy 20-year insurance policies, and they can't get out of them. And so we're attached on day one, and in 20 years, they need you. And so you get paid for 19 years before they need the service. And so that gets you all the cash up front, and then you do the thing. And it's mostly software. And so one thing we should do in the US, which would really improve preventative care and make everybody's life easier, is have multi-year insurance models. The idea that you can switch every year means that you can't have no time for ROI. And so I hope that that's something that comes out, is a multi-year policy, because then you can do a bunch of the stuff that we all want to do and have an ROI period that works.
We couldn't have a sort of AI-oriented event without asking about the investability of like foundation model startups. Like, what is your view on, wrapper companies that are competing directly against OpenAI and Anthropic? Like, how much have you been enticed to invest in businesses that are spending a lot of energy building their own models? And how much have you been wary or not of businesses that rely on OpenAI and others? It's a big question.
It's a big question.
Yeah, I can make him go first. You had to go first on the first one.
I think competing with against the foundation models is crazy.
Don't do it.
And I wouldn't do it. All of our companies are using AI inside to make the product better, the margins higher. And the last panel talked about the need to have multiple models and switching across them. I think the multiple models work awesome, and you can switch across them, and it seems like you can train them pretty quickly to do almost everything you want to do. And so I wouldn't want to compete against that.
Right.
I think about AI making my ideas to serve patients just a lot more scalable, a lot more profitable, a lot more effective. I mean, you can listen to elderly people who are lonely and make them feel better. You can do every language now. You can tailor the care model or the dietary recommendations to any kind of diet. So it makes everything better.
You agree with that? Or?
I agree with that. And I think the reality is it's a safer place to play.
Yeah.
In the sense that they're not going to do the last mile. I mean, they might do it. If you think about drug discovery, I actually think they're going to be working on models that will effectively compete with those that are working in drug discovery companies. But I also think they will partner with pharma and with biotech companies, but they will be closer to the product creation and probably in a way of royalties and some of the classic companies right now they're doing drug discovery. But I think in healthcare service, it's just hard. If you actually looked at the volumes at OpenAI, I mean, the reality is it's the tools, right? Developer tools off the chart,
Right.
using it.
Yeah.
And then you do have the ambiances that are bridges and healthcare
Right.
that are like got, real volumes, and then sort of, everything else falls off.
Right.
I think the reality in drug discovery actually doesn't create much traffic
Right.
for models. But, so, I think the reality is that last mile is really hard.
Right.
They're not going to want to do it from a go-to-market motion, from the actually understanding the edge cases. I mean, they can.
But this is the risk. You're saying the reason OpenAI might not fully embrace it is just like the
guardrails here.
They're in sort of a
No, it's just like how quickly you can scale these things.
yeah.
Right. Like when you have
So you have coding coming at you, it's like, oh, this is great. Like, let's do that.
Yeah, let's do that.
What I want to ask the audience, honestly, just straightforward: AI in health, overhyped, underhyped. Just like let's get the pulse on the room. Overhyped, underhyped. AI in health. All right, who is overhyped? Wow, we've got okay.
This is the most optimistic crowd ever. They're not jaded or skeptical.
Underhyped. Yeah, it's like fast. Okay, great. Yeah. Everyone is still a true believer. No one has gotten off.
They can't deduce that medical.
Yeah. It's good to know where the crowd
I think
is.
the reality is both things can be true.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I think the reality is there are 800 companies that have been funded the last 3 years in doing AI in healthcare, and the reality is that some subset of those, just like Google and Amazon, came out of 2000 and a mania there. I mean, this is a mania. And valuations are going to be like way beyond for every company, but probably what they should be. But that, except for that top 5%.
We bet in a bunch of businesses, and then some of them are.
Exactly. It's the nature of venture investing. I think it's such an extraordinary moment. Like I've never seen a moment in my 30 years in healthcare where we're actually going to make a difference. We are actually going to lower costs. We are actually going to make providers and clinicians' lives better and patients' lives better. So I think it's worth it. And I also think it's, you're going to have the top 5% of companies are going to be amazing, and then you're going to have we'll probably get lucky in some like point solution companies that, we sell them, there'll probably be, I don't know, a couple hundred companies sold. And then, they're going to be the other 600 of the 1,000 that have been created, walking dead, like usual.
Moving on to sort of a new, some companies die in startups, spoiler alert. The GLP-1s and just sort of like change the longevity conversation, like, this idea, like treating longevity means a lot of things to different people. It's obviously sort of an amorphous word. I mean, some of it has been like, oh, let's think outside the medical system. Some of it to people, I think, is like individualized care. Some of it's treating healthy people. But like, what to you has been the lesson from GLP-1s and like how are you using it to change what startups you're looking at?
I mean, they're the greatest medicines I've ever seen, I think, except for cancer drugs.
Yeah.
As a doctor, there's so many patients I've spoken to about, how to be healthier, lose weight, change their diets. And for some people, no matter what they try, it doesn't work. And then you give them a GLP-1 and it works awesome. And everything gets better. Their cardiovascular risk, their cancer risk, their energy, their type 2 diabetes goes away. And the prices for these drugs are falling to the point that they're going to become widely accessible to people, and orals are coming soon. And so this is a revolution, I think, in health for people on Earth. And I hope that they're more accessible to more people faster at the end of the day. I think pairing it with lifestyle changes and an Oura ring and sleep and stuff makes them better. So I hope people do that too and don't just take them and then like eat McDonald's. But I think that we're at the beginning of a lot of biological insights around how to live longer, healthier, and better. But the key thing is years of like health that you can do things where you're alive and well. And I'm very hopeful that we're going to have a bunch of improvements in our joints and in our weight and in our metabolic health and in our cancer care to help us live longer. And I think the next 10 years is going to be actually a kind of like there'll be a wave of longevity type things that really work. And I think about this from the Medicare Advantage insurance. Annie and I are together at Devoted Health, and we think about, or Devoted, how do we improve the lifespan and health of our patients and do it cost effectively. And GLP-1s are now becoming part of the cost effective approach to doing that.
Yeah.
But it goes back to you're actually saying you need to actually own, as an insurer, you need to own the life, long enough to actually have to pay for it.
Like at Devoted, we keep the member more than 5 years, and so we can do a lot of things about their health and well-being.
Investing in people.
That you can't do in a commercial plan where they switch every year, for sure.
Yeah. Have they changed your philosophy on investing at all, or the success of GLP-1s?
No, not really. I mean, I think the reality is I think there's some telehealth. I mean, we're in Noom. That's certainly part of their offering, and I think absolutely makes an impact on people's health and making it more available through compounded drugs. But I think the whole area of longevity, other than frankly GLP-1s, is overhyped.
Yeah.
If that isn't, you may have Function Health speaking today. I mean, I think the reality is 90% of the tests that they do can be reimbursed, by if you go to your doctor.
Yeah. Good. We'll have a dialogue there.
But on GLP-1s, I think the big idea, and there's data from a couple companies, Amada and Virta being the two that I've seen the most data on, Virta we're investors in, is that you can get people off of them and keep the weight off. So what I love about GLP-1s is that anybody who takes them will lose weight. And then that's the moment that you say, let's change your diet, because you're not hungry when you're on GLP-1. So I can then change your diet around. I can teach you how to eat a healthier, lower carbohydrate diet that makes you feel good, and then get you off of the medicine and keep the weight off.
Right.
He is keeping the weight off and not bouncing back and not taking it forever.
Right.
Because we're not sure actually taking them forever at the doses of a GLP-1 weight loss doses is a good idea.
Right.
But for sure, for a year to get you to where you should be, it's a great idea. And if you keep the weight off, then that's the best thing. And so you can see a lot of people doing that. And then it's very cost effective.
Right. Like cutting edge medicine, I guess, or like, I'm taking Wegovy. My wife did a BRCA cancer screening, but those are still like medical establishment provided things. Do you think there are things that like the Silicon Valley connected type is doing in terms of like buying their own tests that you're like,
oh my God.
When your rich friends call you, you're like, you're a doctor and you know everybody. Like,
my rich friends call me, I say, what the fuck are you doing?
You're like, go to a doctor. You're like, don't ingest this stuff. Or is there anything you're like, that's a good one. You should do that.
Oh my God. All right, you're asking for non-evidence-based things that are a good idea to say in public. A lot of people, metformin probably is a good idea for most people. Let's say if it's effective and it makes you live longer. Maybe erythromycin is good for your joints. I don't know, but there's a bunch of people who think it is, maybe. And then we get down the path of supplements. I don't know. People feel better on magnesium, so that's probably good, but I don't know.
Yeah.
But you're wary.
I don't know. Lithium.
I mean,
Right? They came out with a study on lithium this week, actually, where it improves your memory and may reduce dementia.
Interesting.
Blocks plaque. I'm like, okay. Well, you can go to the CVS and get that right in her.
The moving on to sort of the policy conversation. I mean, both of you, I think, were excited, a potential upside of a Republican administration with that they would embrace Medicare Advantage. Have you seen that? What's your read specifically on Medicare Advantage? And then I'll ask more broadly what your reaction to sort of the Trump health policy has been.
All right, Annie, you're up.
You're up.
Okay, so weirdly, both Trump administrations have had a number of my CEOs actually involved, and they've been, I would say, much more constructive than the Biden administration, unfortunately, in healthcare. So I would say there are two things. I mean, obviously, Medicaid is actually, the one that people are most worried about, and the obviously the subsidization of the exchanges. My biggest fear is actually the exchanges go away because you don't do the subsidies. People then the cost of the exchange being on the exchange goes up so much that the healthy people just get off it. They're not going to pay.
Basically, Medicaid funding has been cut because of worker tests.
Yes, worker testing.
And then if you don't have that money flowing in,
but also worried about the changes because there's still all the people under the ACA who will be subsidized on the exchange. We're going to lose about 2 million people from the subsidies expiration. The 22 million will stay. So there's enough healthy people there.
Well, I can only talk from one state, but we're down to like one insurer willing to be in that.
Well, that's the question: is it exciting for insurance companies?
Yeah, does it make sense for insurers? Because you're gonna, I think, the risk of that population, you have a less healthy population in those exchanges. And on the MA side, I think it's interesting because I think Republicans and Democrats, like obviously, as one of my CEOs said, Republicans have now become Democrats, or at least the base that's supporting it. The base that was supporting Democrats is now supporting Republicans. Republicans now supporting Democrats. So what does that mean for our policies? And I would say that on MA, they're going to be friendlier, but we'll see how friendly at the end of the day, because if you actually looked at the legislature, they don't like health. They see that the citizens don't like health plans.
Right.
They blame everything on the health plan.
Right.
So therefore, MA is, and you've got not-for-profit health systems also blaming the MA. So you've got like two groups that are now like dumping on MA, and it'll be interesting to see where it all comes out.
I think when Dr. Oz wakes up in the morning after he takes whatever supplements he takes, he thinks to himself, how can I grow the MA business for the world? And so I think that they're going to make stars easier. More plans will be in 4+ star plans. I think they're going to, like, besides United Healthcare, like in general, put more money into the system and want it to grow. I think they're going to pay for food as medicine because that's a RFK Jr. idea. And I think that at the end of this, the Medicare Advantage will be quite a bit bigger than
it will be bigger.
Yeah.
So you're optimistic on that.
Well, I just wake up in the morning thinking that every Republican's wearing a T-shirt that says "I Heart MA" because they like the privatization of Medicare, and they would like that for going to be bigger. And so while they're making,
but Annie is saying that like the voter base, it doesn't square anymore. That they would continue.
I know that's the confusing part because everything's confusing. But I think that at the end of the day, like Republicans love MA, and that's just one of those things that is like it's a dogmatic statement. And I think they don't like the administrative burden of the current STARS program, of all the complexity that we put in it as a to make it fairer.
Right.
So I think they're going to let it grow, with the asterisks being United Healthcare concerns them because of their coding practices, and they're going to get a bunch of scrutiny.
And the vaccine skepticism, like what's your reaction to that? Like how damaging or not do you think it will be?
I think it's actually very damaging. But I do think, for example, we're actually in a vaccine administration company that's doing very well. But last year, when you had states like Texas and Oklahoma, you had several, I would say, towns that did not embrace vaccines, and those towns ended up getting the measles. And then more children went to the hospital. You had a couple of kids die. Our vaccines administration for measles went up 50% last year. So I think that's all it takes. And I do think you mostly have rational physicians. I think physicians are, say that vaccines are good in general. And most
I
people
the list is there, obviously, but our pediatrician won't even recommend a non-vaccine providing doctor. You don't want to take vaccine, like good luck.
Vaccines are the safest intervention that exists in healthcare on the earth, period. They work.
Yeah.
You should get them. You should recommend them. I give them to people. And I think that most people actually believe that and will get them.
Yeah.
I think it's sad that we're making them harder to get. I think it's sad that now they won't always be covered, so you might have to pay out of pocket. But my 84-year-old aunt just sent me a picture from this morning from Safeway where she was getting her COVID shot, and then she bought herself a donut, and it was a good day for her. And so I'm happy about that.
Great. Bob and Annie, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Here's a conversation with venture capitalist Vinod Khosla. I sat down with Nayeema Raza, my Deus Ex Medicina co-host, to talk with Vinod about all the major themes in health.
You've been making predictions about healthcare since, I think, longer than we've been alive.
The last long-term prediction I did was in 2016, about 10 years ago. And I would say we are well ahead of the schedule. I predicted 8 3-year cycles of innovation. So I had assumed 3-year cycles of significant innovation. That's 25 years. So I figured 2040, but I think things are happening much faster than I ever imagined.
One of the things you've said is that innovation and AI is not going to come from the giants. It's going to come from startups. You've held strong to that. So when you look at it, who do you see as the kind of Tesla? You're famously, you're a big fan of what Elon Musk has done in electric vehicles. Who do you see as the Tesla of AI and then the Tesla of healthcare?
Well, I don't think the Tesla of AI has emerged.
Okay.
But it will emerge. So if you look at healthcare companies today, and I speak to all of them, I speak to their boards and executives, they are looking at things incrementally. And so, yes, and I'm very glad they'll all introduce a bridge, one of our companies, so great. But that's taking current system and incrementally adding AI to it and automating. There was a board I was speaking to recently. I said, clearly do that. And you can take costs out and improve efficiency. In fact, just like a bridge does. We have a company in the UK called Kocher, and they just announced a major study with the NHS where doctors adapting their system, and this is pretty stunning, got 25% more actual face time with patients. And so my tweet was, so suddenly they've increased the doctor supply in all of the UK by 25%. That's a pretty big deal. It would have taken them 2 decades to do that any other way. But that's not the key question. The key question is, if you believe all healthcare expertise, it doesn't matter whether you're talking about primary care doc, a mental health therapist, a psychiatrist, an oncologist, a gastroenterologist, a physical therapist, a health coach, if all of it was free, how would you design a healthcare system? That's a very different system than today's system.
But venture capitalists have been throwing themselves against those rocks for decades.
Was sort of like, so there are constraints. Now, there were constraints in automotive too. Lots of regulation, lots of standards. And what it takes is not rocks. What it takes is a great entrepreneur like Elon did that.
And you don't look across and see that. Yeah, you say it hasn't. Yeah,
I haven't seen a person fundamentally trying to redesign the system on an assumption that all expertise costs zero. So you never ration access to an oncologist or a neurologist. You'd provide it upfront, day one, first conversation, because it's the same cost as a nurse.
Do you think that might happen outside of the United States? Because, I mean, one of the themes that we've been hearing from people today is how the U.S. is lagging behind on healthcare, not just from outcomes, but...
I think it might happen in the developing world.
Yeah.
Now, developing world costs are very low for expertise.
Yeah.
So a doctor in India doesn't cost very much. But it might happen there. I do think I had originally, when I first wrote my blog in 2016, thought the uninsured population in the U.S., which was back then about 40 million people, a pretty good size, would be the right place to start because they have no other alternative. But instead, Obamacare took a lot of those people away.
I wanted to pose what to me is the existential question of this conference, right? We've spoken before at the Cerebral Valley AI Summit, which sort of takes as the premise that the smartest companies will be the general purpose models. And obviously you are the first venture investor in OpenAI. You're highly aligned with OpenAI, but you also have health investments, obviously many of them as well. What's your heuristic? How do you decide this is the domain of the juggernaut, of OpenAI, of the general purpose model versus say it's a health specific challenge?
In a lot of areas, I like to joke, every time OpenAI releases a model, half of the YC batch goes out of business.
Right.
That's just the standard paradigm. So I think if you're a startup...
And they're interested in health.
Huh?
They're interested in health.
They're interested in health. They're interested in health. They're interested in a lot of different areas, and they should be. And all the major guys will do all these things. Well, what has happened traditionally is because there's not one model provider, and you can easily move between model providers, the question will be, on top of the model, where OpenAI or Anthropic or Google will have an advantage, what value can they add for the specific application? Now, will they want to pull up a patient's record out of Epic before giving advice? Tricky question. I couldn't say never, but it's not looking likely that they're going to write you a prescription today. And I think there's many, many things you can do that would be startup territory. So I think there'll be great startups. I don't care what OpenAI does. It doesn't compete with Sword Health. Sword Health is doing physical therapy at a level and growing faster than I would ever imagine any healthcare startup, with the exception of a bridge, which is doing really, really well. Fortunate to be investors in both. But there is going to be value added. Physical therapy is one of those where an AI is watching you and guiding you and handling billability. And now, people like Amazon taking care of the fact that they'll bill your insurance. Will OpenAI do that? Google do that? Possibly.
Yeah. We're going to ask you what companies you like outside of your portfolio, Vinod. But I do want, on this idea of outside of AI, you're seeing obviously massive tailwinds around GLP-1. How has that and the willingness of consumers to pay out of pocket changed your thesis on healthcare, if at all?
I think consumers have always been willing to pay if it's cost effective, not the insurance price. This is the only market where buying one of something is cheaper than buying 100,000 of something. That's the unfortunate part of the healthcare system. But GLP-1 is a good example. But, 4 years ago, people said people will never pay out of pocket for cardiac care. AliveCor has 300,000 subscribers, and retention is 90-some% year to year. The cardiac patients die, but other than that, incredible retention, incredible engagement. The typical patient is taking 6 ECGs a month. You'd be lucky if you're in the best healthcare system and got 6 ECGs in 2 years, right? That's per month. Now they can look at your, they have the data, millions and millions of ECGs per month, usually in context, and they can do something like, say, hey, you're taking, by the way, this doesn't even take FDA approval. We're watching your ECGs, you're taking them more than once a week. Something's changing. Come on in, talk to our cardiologist. So just an alert saying you need to check in is incredibly valuable. And the number of visits to emergency rooms goes through the floor. So that's an example of something the big model companies aren't going to do. They aren't going to take that many ECGs and provide coaching around that. So the sword is an example. That's an example. There's plenty of examples like that.
When you think about, your own health or, recommending to your friends, like how much do you think all the things you're doing are recommended by a doctor, or you think there is like
everything I do is recommended by ChatGPT, and then I check with the doctors for safety. Like, is it okay?
You're sincere? You're being sincere?
I am being sincere.
Your doctor's like, oh my God, why are you bringing this to me? Or honestly,
I always ask them, and if they disagree with ChatGPT, I ask another doctor. Because so here,
I believe there's a.
So let me give you a recent study out of Stanford. Annie Milstein, who's probably one of the better known professors in the country on quality of medical care, did a multi-center study, human doctor performance this was for complex disease diagnosis at pretty fancy institutions like Stanford. Human accuracy in complex disease diagnosis was 73%. That means 27% of the patients of complex disease, this is not you got the flu, got the wrong diagnosis or a suboptimal diagnosis. AI, which was out of the box, it wasn't really tuned for medical practice, was 88%. And then they gave the AI to the doctors improved, but from 73% to 76%, and they degraded the AI from 88 to 76.
Right.
And what
that is the reality of
ChatGPT raw. You don't want to have the doctor messing with it.
Well, this is why if a doctor disagrees with ChatGPT, you should ask another doctor and another doctor.
And another doctor, ChatGPT. What happened when they gave the GPT the doctors?
GPT couldn't use the doctor. It's who you put in charge.
Yeah.
If the doctor's in charge, they will introduce their biases. And one of the biggest biases the doctor has is recency bias. Which patient did they see recently and what did they have?
Do you think that there's...
By the way, plenty of studies to show if the New York Times mentions a disease, its diagnosis in the country goes way up. It's this recency bias.
And AI has some recency bias, surely, because it's building...
Hopefully not, but yeah.
Right? When you look at the future, one of the things, Manjal Shah was here earlier today talking about Hippocratic AI, and if when asked how many doctors will there be in the world in 2040, he said there'll be as many doctors as people. The clinicians will all be artificial intelligence agents. Tom Hale was here from Aura and talked about, I asked him if the ring would one day connect to an agent, and he said that he and Manjal had been talking about that. Is there going to be a bundle in healthcare?
Well, here's the thing. Healthcare is large span. There's 4 major chunks to it. One is doctors and expertise outside the hospital. Another slice is drugs. Another slice is testing and MRI and imaging and blood tests and x-rays. And another test is in-hospital care. So roughly say each one is $1 trillion. The first portion, which is medical expertise, is going to be better in an AI, no question, if we let it get there. The AMA is completely opposed to AI practicing medicine or prescribing because for $1, they lose a $150 physician visit in the clinic. That's the reality, right? I've talked to he stepped down now, the president of the AMA, 6 times. And they always avoid the topic. But there's going to be easy ways. I was just talking to Dr. Oz, and I said, so how many people are familiar with Medicare Advantage? A few hands. The odd thing about Medicare Advantage, if you talk to companies like Humana, that are some of the largest in Medicare Advantage, they spend, I would say, 80% of their effort in risk scoring a patient up, not on medical care. They provide almost no care. And now what I told Dr. Oz is Medicare Advantage should have an AI score the patient. If a provider like Humana disagrees with the scoring, they can appeal it to a human, but then if they're wrong, they pay for it. It's a simple gist.
Did you get the read that they are going to do more in Medicare Advantage or less, or what was your read on it?
I think there's definitely a lot of interest in doing that kind of thing. But why would you let the fox in the hen house and let them say, how complex is this patient, so pay me more?
What is your outlook on what the Trump administration has done in healthcare so far? What kind of grade would you give them, A through F?
Well, I think RFK, I don't know if there's a grade low enough. What comes last? F. F minus minus?
You think he's going to last?
I won't comment on that. I don't know the inside politics. He obviously cut a deal with Trump during the election. Which is a sad state of affairs where our health portfolio and vaccine policies are auctioned off during an election. But they are doing a lot of good things.
For example?
I would say Dr. Oz has a very sensible view of how to use AI. In fact, I first wrote a 100-page document on the transformation of medicine in 2016 called 20% Doctor Included. It's a 100-page PDF. And I have an email from Dr. Oz in 2016 commenting on my blog.
Wow.
So 10 years ago. So he's very interested in that kind of thing. I think the FDA is very interested. The new head of AI at the FDA, Shantanu, is very, very interested in more adoption of AI.
And the CDC, any thoughts on what's happening at the CDC?
I have no exposure to the CDC. I tend not to deal with that side of it.
Put some of this in the context of the competition with China. Obviously, that's been an important issue for you. How do you scale? We were hearing earlier today, certainly, developing drugs, China is becoming, in some ways...
It's become the dominant place. All our companies trying to go to China, get first in humans is easy. Drug manufacturing is easy. There's still decent regulation, but trials are easier.
Does that mean the U.S. needs to loosen up? It's not a big deal. It can be developed in China, and then we can pay for it. What's your sense of how this plays out?
Well, I don't think we will loosen up here. So that's unfortunate.
So fast forward.
Now, there's another path, right? AI-based drug design can be done pretty differently. Not for all diseases, a vaccine is a vaccine for everybody. But there's a lot of diseases. For example, in sickle cell anemia, gene therapy can be pretty well done here. We have a company that's treated its second patient, it's public data, completely cured of sickle cell.
That kind of precision preventative medicine that seems to be taking off in the United States. Do you think, fast forward, do you still think a time horizon for predictions should be 40 years, or should it now be 10 years?
You can't predict past 5 years in technology. Application of technology is a different metric, especially if it has a regulatory constraint. That's why I think it's completely up for grabs. How aggressive or regressive will the administration be? I'm hopeful this administration, in its quest to have fewer regulation, will be much more aggressive in adapting AI and new technologies in this country.
And what are 3 things that you think American policymakers, regulators should be doing to set America up to beat China and follow?
Well, first assume AI will be smarter than humans in almost every single area.
No, don't side with the AMA. Side with the consumer.
Right. Because the government is such a large spender in healthcare, have a process for safely, because safety is, no matter what you think, and no matter what RFK thinks, what safety is critical in healthcare, but you can still do safety in a lot of trials. I mean, look at the medicine. The fundamental premise of medicine is the Hippocratic oath, which every doctor takes. And it's mathematically wrong. It's the dumbest rule to have. If you can save 10 lives and do a little harm and save 10,000 lives, won't do it.
You want the Bayesian oath, not the Hippocratic oath here.
But, taking a progressive, logical, first principles view of what is the right thing to do, that's the right thing.
Great. Well, we can talk all day. Vinod Khosla, thank you so much.
So much.
Great. Thank you.